Hi, everybody. We are very glad you've joined us. I am Perry from the White Pigeon Township Library, and we're bringing you Tuesday Talk. This week, we are honored to be welcoming Wade Rouse, a Michigan author, and one that's quite popular here at our library. Today, we have joining us also Lois Tracy, Judy from our staff, Laura Kemp, Pam Shank, who's on our board, and Linda Wordinger. She's still working things out there, but she's down there. And last but not least, Wade Rouse. Thank you very much, Wade, for joining us. And I'm just going to let you take it away.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor. It's for National Library Week. I spoke a lot about my love of libraries and their influence on my life. And I truly can never overstate the impact that libraries had on me growing up. Both of my grandmothers volunteered at our local library, and they became my sanctuary. I grew up in the Missouri Ozarks, and that's where I spent inordinate amounts of times. And the librarians there, I felt like, became my best friends. And they made me believe that, with books in my imagination, I could be anyone I dreamed of being and go anywhere I dreamed I could, even though I grew up in a very, very small rural town. So, like publishing, libraries have changed immensely over the past decades, but I say the core foundation has not changed, and that is that books change lives, and they will always change lives. And you make that happen, and you are the heart, souls, and nerve centers of our community. So thank you for having me. The question, I'm going to start because the question I get asked most often, and I'm sorry if it's one that somebody might have, is why I chose a pen name for my fiction. And I think it's an appropriate place to start because, growing up in rural Missouri, I spent enormous amounts of times with both of my grandmothers growing up. My grandma Shipman lived a rolling hill away from me. My grandma Rouse lived just a couple of miles away from me. And my grandmothers were my best friends growing up. And I know that sounds silly to say as an adult, but my grandma and grandpa Shipman were both working poor. My grandma Shipman, Viola, my pen name, was a seamstress. She stitched overalls at a local factory until she couldn't stand straight. My grandpa Shipman was an ore miner. And when that work dried up, he raked rocks in farmers' fields just to make enough money to put food on the table. He hunted and fished to make sure that his family could eat. And the story goes that my mom always told me was that my grandparents had an old crock in their garage. If you remember the big old urns back in the day. And any spare change they had, they would throw into that crock. And when it got full, they put it in the back of their pickup and dragged it to the community bank and started a college fund for my mother. And she would become the first in our family to graduate college. So, that truly changed the course of my family's life. But, my grandmother, all of my grandmothers had heirlooms. They had charm bracelets, they had recipe boxes, they had hope chests filled with quilts and family Bibles and scrapbooks and desert rose dishes. Things that we take for granted these days, but for people like my grandmothers who didn't have much money, they told the legacy of our family and truly told the story of my family's life. And, every novel I write is set in Michigan, in a different Michigan resort town. But the unifying theme is all of them are inspired by my grandmother's heirlooms, life, legacy, and love. And the fact that my grandmothers got it, they got what life is all about. And I mean, I think we've all been reminded of what that is over the course of the past year. My grandma used to always say, life is as short as one blink of God's eye, but too often in that blink, we forget what's most important. And that's our family, our friends, our health, having a roof over our heads, and each other. And that's what I like to write about in every single novel. And I like to bring characters like my mother and my grandmothers as the main characters into every novel, because I think too often women like that are overlooked in not only life, but also in literature. You know, good, hardworking women who get knocked down time and again by life and just do their darndest to be the best people they can. And I'm very proud. You know, I always say, if someone walks in, and I don't want to give up on my life this easily, but in 50 years and I'm no longer around, and someone picks up a book in your library and they say Viola Shipman, my grandma's name, and it forces them to reconnect or ask a question of an elder or their family, something they'd never thought or pondered before, then I think my work will have been done. You know, my new novel, very excited, is The Clover Girls. It is out May 18th, and it's the story of 4 very different girls who meet at summer camp in northern Michigan in the 1980s and become the very best of friends until, as we too often know, adulthood and life distances them. And one of the friends is diagnosed with a terminal illness, and she reaches out to her other 3 friends, asking them to reunite at camp in order to, you know, kind of salvage the friendship they once had, but also hoping they can all be the women they once dreamed they could be, and fulfill the dreams that they once had. And it's, you know, I think a beautiful summer ode to friendship as well as forgiveness, not only, you know, of others, but mostly of ourselves, which is so often very hard to do. You know, it's inspired by the loss of friends over the last couple of years who, you know, really showed me the fragility of life and how important friendship is. And many friends that I loved but not stayed in touch with. And this, you know, the course of writing this book forced me to reach back out to them and ask myself why I didn't. You know, is it just life? We get busy, family, career, jobs, or is it for some other reason? And reconnecting to those friends, you know, has kind of buoyed me over the past couple of years and changed me deeply. So I'm very excited about that novel. And my first holiday novel is also coming out in October. It's called The Secret of Snow, set in Traverse City. And I'm very excited to celebrate. I do summer a lot. I'm celebrating all things winter in Michigan and all the activities that we all love to do. So very excited about that, and have 3 books coming out in 2022 as well, including my very first memoir in a decade, which will be out from HarperCollins. So you've asked what I've been doing over the course of the last 14 months. I've been swilling coffee in a horrible robe and writing nonstop. And I think the blessing is that, you know, the silver lining is, you know, COVID is that people are reading more than they ever have before. And books are allowing all of us an escape, a needed escape from the world. So that's been one beautiful blessing of what's been a very nightmarish last year. So I will stop babbling. I could babble until, you know, the turn of the century. So I will open it up for any questions you all have.
Laura, do you want to start?
Sure. Wade, it's so good to see you.
You too.
Oh, I miss you guys. Gary and I were maybe talking about something fun to do when I come on your show. So
Yeah,
he's actually texting me just now. I was like, gotta talk to Wade. But
attention span like a gnat. So
so I just got chills when you told me the plot line of Clover Girls. I just got all of these chills going up and down my arms. So I'm really excited to read the book. And I know that you set all of your stories in Michigan and all these cute little coastal towns. So my question is, have you ever thought about setting a book on Mackinac Island, my favorite place?
I
and if so, can we write it together? So
I love that. And I know you, that's your special place. And
it is.
yeah, yes, I am. It's interesting. As you know, Michigan, I mean, the incredible thing about Michigan is, you know, I intentionally set every novel in a Michigan, usually a Michigan resort town. And I do that just like many authors that we love, you know, set their novels in the Low Country or Nantucket or Seattle. It's because Michigan the geography and people are so beautiful, and each town is so stunningly unique, but also has an incredible history that we can explore. And I love, one of my goals in every book is to make the setting as big a character as any of my characters. And yes, that is on my mind, Matt. It's on my list. I have honestly, people give me ideas and I have a scroll. I'm trying to go further around the state, and I'm really getting a lot of grief from people on the east side that are saying, you're not doing as much. So that will be happening. And yes, so it's interesting, like the Secret of Snow is set, the Clover Girls is set in Glen Arbor, the Secret of Snow is set in Traverse City, but partially for the first time, I've set a novel in Palm Springs where I winter. So it's kind of the juxtaposition of the desert and Michigan in winter, which I'm excited. And I'm toying with like Good Heart. I'm kind of like a very small little town, like Tunnel of Trees. I'm thinking.
Is that actually a town?
It is, yeah.
Good Heart?
Yes.
Which the
That's
best
a great name.
and the best general store, post office kind of. And it's stunningly beautiful. So yes, I'm making my way around the state, and actually, once this ends, we're hoping that we can do, like you love to do a big tour for the books.
And you'll end it in White Pigeon, I'm sure. Right?
I will end it there.
You would love that.
Yay. Thanks, Wade.
Judy, how about you?
I do. I kind of like to follow up on that. I'm really excited to read Clover Girls because I love Glen Arbor. And it is very special to me because I have some college girlfriends, and that's where we go. Sometimes in the winter, sometimes in the summer, but Sutton's Bay, Glen Arbor, we take over that peninsula when we're visiting. So that's exciting.
It's stunning.
But I'm reading this right now because I wanted to get to know you before this happened.
And you are getting to know me.
Yeah, I really like you. It's great. It's funny.
Thank you.
Great book. But my question is, I know you're close to Saugatuck, and I love that town. What's your favorite restaurant?
Oh, you're going to get me into a heap of trouble. There's so many I love in Saugatuck. I love Everyday People in Douglas is one of my favorite restaurants. It's been around.
I have been there. That's a great spot.
Yeah, Matt is a friend of mine who owns it and is the chef. And it's just, I think he does a tremendous job. In Saugatuck, Coast is very good. It's new. It's a seafood restaurant run by a friend, Mindy, that came from Chicago. It's a great restaurant. I love eating at Mermaid. It's right on the water.
Like the Mermaid, yeah, that's fun.
Friends of mine are owners of that as well, and they've been through a very tough year. Coffee-wise, I'm a huge coffee addict. Uncommon Grounds has I think the best coffee in America, and I don't step down from that testament because it's so good. I eat if you know Crane's Pie Pantry in Fenville. The single best desserts in the world. I go and get pies, cider donuts. Half of my body is comprised of sugar, so I exercise so I can just mainline sugar most of the day. So that's the place to go for, and it's set on an orchard, and it's the quaintest restaurant ever. So I can go on. There are many places.
Okay, well, thank you. Maybe I'll run into you because we do have a couple of the same favorite spots.
You will, and I think this summer, hopefully, we'll all be back out again. So I'm excited to actually go eat again somewhere.
No kidding.
Instead of making my own food.
All right, thank you, Wade.
Thanks.
Lois, how about you?
Oh, I'd love to talk to Wade. My sister and I enjoy your Thursday nights together.
Thank you.
Those are a hit. And on the Thursday night program, I heard Gary say something about a Viola Shipman store online. Is that making any progress?
It is making progress. So I'm glad you enjoyed the Thursday night lives. That's what Laura and I were talking about. She's going to be on this summer. It's called Wine and Words with Wade, and it's every Thursday on the Viola Shipman Facebook page at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. And we have publishing insiders, and I talk about writing and best-selling authors. We have Susan Mallory joining us tomorrow. And then 4 friends and fiction authors joining all May, including Mary Kay Andrews and Mary Alice Monroe. But yes, the online store is progressing. So we get a lot of requests for kind of gift items, but also heirloom items that people might want to buy. So we're trying to think very carefully about what we would offer and just not try and throw up anything and everything. So we're thinking of maybe Christmas ornaments, charms for a bracelet, maybe some, obviously everybody likes coffee mugs, maybe some mugs with quotes on them. But we have a lot of ideas that we're kind of circulating, and maybe even some, it's really cute. We have a woman that's made some very cute tote bags for a Mother's Day event I'm doing with McLean and Aiken booksellers and Petoskey and Valley booksellers in Minnesota. So we're maybe doing some, maybe going to do some tote bags, some aprons, some pot holders, some things that people love when they cook as well. So yeah, I mean, it's whittling it down because I don't want to put anything up that's not great, because then you hear from people, you know, that tell you how much they hate it. So I want to make sure it's really good and that I like it and that we're using it. But yes, we're whittling that list down.
The tote bag was wonderful. I did see that when you held it up. It was very interesting.
Yeah. So
can you tell me? I'm sorry.
We're trying to make people that we're trying to hire, especially local artists in the US that can hand make these instead of, you know, going overseas and having them mass produced. So it's making it a little harder, but I kind of want some very well-made items that are made here in the US.
They'll be more special that way.
I hope so, yeah.
Thank you.
Linda, do you have a question for Wade? I don't think Linda can hear us. How about Pam?
Well, Wade, this is so fun to talk to you. I especially enjoy your memoirs. I feel like I could be your neighbor and stop in for a cup of coffee and play with your dogs and hang out with your family. And so I really appreciate the not only the wisdom that you're sharing of the female people in your life. I really appreciate that. I think that's so valuable, especially coming from a male perspective. I think that is just such a gift that you're giving us, and I appreciate that. Can you talk a little bit about your memoirs? What is it like to write them versus writing a novel?
That's a great question. Yeah, so many people don't know, I started writing humorous memoir before I started writing fiction. And, you know, I grew up, I say this all the time, I get crickets when I say it to millennials these days, but I grew up adoring Irma Bombeck. So she was a huge influence on me. And I loved her tenacity, but also that she just wrote about daily life. You know, they always say, write about what you know. And she wrote about it from her own unique perspective and point of view, which is all a writer can do. You know, that's all that separates us from one another, is we pretty much tell the same stories. It's just how we bring it to life that makes it different. So I always admired her. And humor is, you know, growing up, me in the Ozarks, you know, boy that liked to read and wear ascots, didn't go over so well. So humor was always, you know, how I made sense of the world, how I made friends, how I deflected any pain. So I started writing. That's just my voice and how I wanted to start writing. And my first memoir was America's Boy, about growing up in the Missouri Ozarks and everything I just, you know, told you about. And 4 memoirs came out kind of in quick succession. The second was Confessions of a Prep School Mommy Handler, followed by At Least in the City, Someone Would Hear Me Scream, about city boys moving to the woods in Saugatuck. That was the book that really kind of kicked things off for me because it was featured on the Today Show and in USA Today. And then I wrote It's All Relative, a memoir about the beauty and dysfunction of family holidays. And there's a lot of both, believe me. And then writing fiction, you know, it's such a good question because I think I thought I could write a novel and I thought I could do it easily. And when I started and began to send pages to my agent, you know, when I'm doing so, saying that I want to write fiction for women using my grandmother's name, you know, it's very Victoria sounding. It's very odd. And it did not come easily. You know, it was, I think I was struggling between the voice I used in memoir and then trying to write fiction. You know, and The Charm Bracelet was my first novel, and it was 3 generations of women. So their voices, and it just wasn't working. And my agent called me and she basically said, "This is horrible." And you know, and after you work on it for a year, that's not what you want to hear. But she said, you know, it's essentially like writing a novel is like wrestling a bear to the ground. You know, it's a very different animal and you're going to get scratched up along the way. But once you get it down, you'll know how to do it over and over again, which I thought was an odd analogy coming from a woman that was born and raised in New York. So she didn't, I'm like, where'd you get the bear analogy? But it's very appropriate. You know, I finally had to move into a mindset of, you know, when you write memoir, you know all of your characters. You know those you love, those you don't, your friends and family. You try to know yourself intimately. I had to relearn that writing fiction. I write character-driven fiction, so I have to get inside the skins of every character. So I started doing very large personality profiles of those characters. You know, their quirks, what they, just like my mother and dad had weird phraseologies they used every day. What is it that these characters did and said and how they acted? So that's how I started to do it. And, you know, fiction, a novel is also, the arc of telling the story is very different than writing a memoir. You know, people get to know you, and so you become a character in memoir, and they can kind of follow your eccentricities as well. You can go back and forth in time very quickly. You can kind of go off on your own train of thought, and as long as you're making them laugh or making them think differently, then they will stay with you. It's not the same in fiction. You know, it has to be very well orchestrated. There can't be, you know, too many additional paragraphs or pages that aren't essential to the story. So it was very hard to do for me, and it's gotten easier. And your question is really ironic because as I mentioned, my first memoir in a decade's being published next year. And I thought, oh my gosh, now, you know, that'll be so easy going back to do that. And it was not. You know, it was very difficult to find that voice again and to write in, you know, I always compare writing, sorry to babble about this, it's just a great question, but you know, I call writing a great memoir like packing a backpack for a long hike. You can only take the essentials in it. So you really have to pare your life down to that base story that you want to tell and knock everything away. You know, and this is a memoir, it's very funny and sad about my relationship with my father, you know, me and my dad, countryman, you know, this. And the only thing that bonded us was our love of baseball and the St. Louis Cardinals. So it takes course over the last 9 innings of the last baseball game we watched together and goes back and forth through time. My dad was, if you've read my other memoirs, my dad was hilarious. My dad was no BS. My dad was the polar opposite of me, and yet we were, you know, we're so much the same. You know, we live in the Ozarks, you get rocky. You know, it's hard to, sometimes you got to knock away a lot of that stuff like my grandpa did to get to know us. But it was a very difficult journey, and memoir is so personal. And reliving that is so haunting and yet so cathartic that it was, you know, I would write some days and I would weep I'm not exaggerating, I would cry for 2 hours, thinking of my father, thinking of my family, what I said and never said, what I wanted to say and didn't, like we all do. And I actually think writing that has, the novels that are coming out now, I think has made me an even better novelist, because I feel like I'm going even more deeply into characters' past, seeing the ghosts on their shoulders and then putting myself more into the novels than I have before. So thank you for asking that. Sorry to yammer.
No, we love it. It just mentioning, when you talk to our friends in fiction ladies, we would love to talk to them also. So put in a good word for us.
I will put in a word, and I have to say,
Please do.
it's interesting, doing the Wine and Words with Wade, like they're doing with Friends in Fiction. A year ago, we all had books coming out. We were panicked because at the height of the pandemic, we had no way to promote or publicize them. I certainly thought my career, was gone, because, you sell 4 books. It's not really what the publisher wants to hear. So I think we all had this collective panic at the time. So the beauty is we started these things like you're doing right now, that I think even after we're back to full normalcy again, we will continue, because in many ways we get to spend more quality time together like this and reach more people than maybe we have done before. And I've been stunned at how much authors have supported each other the last year and buoyed each other. You talk about those French and fiction authors, they have taken me under their wing. They've supported me. They've promoted me. And I've tried to do exactly the same. And, that's going to continue going forward as well. So, I think it's just another silver lining. Not only are people reading more, but we're connecting, I think, in unique, maybe even deeper ways. And we're all supporting each other in ways we never thought would happen. But I will put in a good word.
Oh, thank you.
I saw you there last week, Wade, while I was watching. I watch their show every Wednesday when I get home from work. So
it's terrific. Yeah, they had me on doing a special role for Christy Harvey's
for her book
so
release.
they have a Friends in Fiction theater, so I played a role along with Ellen Hilderbrand, and her reception was spotty at best, but I tried to do my best Southern accent.
Yeah, you were Oscar worthy, I would say. You did great, and I love the painting.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So I am really looking forward to the Clover Girls coming out. I really like your fiction, but what I really have enjoyed is your nonfiction, especially at least in the city. And just if you can kind of expand on that, how you and Gary happened to move to Michigan.
Yeah. So as I said, I grew up in the Missouri Ozarks. I went to graduate school at Northwestern and lived in Chicago, but then moved back to St. Louis. And I think for many small town folks, you have 2 options in Missouri. You have Kansas City or St. Louis. And St. Louis is the biggie of the 2. And, I always loved St. Louis growing up. I had an affinity for the Cardinals. Always went there on vacation with my family. And Gary grew up in Southern Illinois in Carbondale, very kind of rural. It's not Chicago. It's as far down as you can go into the corner. And so we both ended up moving to St. Louis, and, we met in a time before cell phones. That really dates me, at a coffee shop. And, we ended up moving. We went on vacation to Cape Cod, and one of the owners of the bed and breakfast we stayed at was actually from Michigan. And she said, "Why did you come so far for beaches? You should just go to Michigan." And we were like, actually, that makes sense. So went up that fall to Saugatuck on vacation, and it was a perfect October weekend with fall color. And I used to think people were absolutely bonkers when they would say, "Oh my gosh, I went to this town and I fell in love with it. I have to live there." I got back in, we drove back to St. Louis, and I said, "I think we have to live there." I mean, couldn't afford anything, couldn't have a second home. And I truly meant it. There was just something that resonated in my soul. And I went back, actually started writing my first, what would be for my first memoir. I always wanted to write a book, and Gary said, write a book. And I'm like, oh, he goes, you can talk about doing it your whole life, but unless you do it, then, you'll never know. And my mother said the same thing. There's a great old Irma Bombeck quote about, writing a book and just having the courage to put it all out there. We keep our dreams in a box, but what happens when you open that box and let it out? So that's always inspired me. So yeah, I ended up taking a huge risk. I quit my job with great benefits and, retirement and all the stuff that we need and love, and moved to Saugatuck full-time in 2006. My first book had just come out. I did not have a contract for my second book at all. I wrote it, panicked, and, things just worked out after that. But, living, that memoir, at least in the city, someone would hear me scream, is about, I loved Walden by Thoreau. I thought when we moved, we would kind of recreate, the beauty that he found in the woods. And it was nothing like that in the beginning. We moved in February. You don't move to Michigan in February. That's a huge mistake. I was accosted by a raccoon, things that things you don't experience. I mean, we lived in the city in St. Louis, so it's things that you don't experience there. You can walk 2 minutes to Starbucks, get your coffee. There it was, full on apocalypse now camouflage at the country store every day when I go to get the pizza and a gallon of milk. And so it was a very new experience for me, but, things have worked out beautifully. And it's funny, many of the people I wrote about, and at least like my neighbor with the night vision goggles, have become dear, dear friends. And those are the folks you need watching your house. They're the folks that you need keeping an eye out for you. So I've learned to play real well with everyone.
Well, I so appreciate you joining us today, Wade. Why don't you give us one more plug about the book that's coming out in May?
Yeah, The Clover Girls is out May 18th, but if anybody watches this, go to the local library and get it, or you can pre-order it at, I always say Michigan's chock full of just wonderful independent booksellers. So please support those small businesses because they need it. And yeah, The Clover Girls is set in Glen Arbor, and it's an ode to our forever friends, those people that complete us and make us who we are. And I say, if you have a friend that, could be your mother, your sister, your neighbor, somebody at church, if they know you better than anyone else does in this world, then I think this book will resonate in your soul. So I hope everybody loves it as much as I loved writing it.
Can't wait to read it.
Thank you so much, Wade. We really appreciate your time, and we are really looking forward to Clover Girls.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.